So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm thrilled to be here today, and I want to thank CU Set and especially Suja ma'am and Madhuraj for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity. For those of you who don't know, Suja ma'am and Professor Jaykumar sir, who is also present today, they've helped me immensely. They've taught me for my master's program, and they've helped me throughout, and they've encouraged me so much. And because of them, I'm here today. So, thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk about the work that we have been doing here in Kerala. Can I request somebody's mic is on? Can I request the mic to be turned off, please? Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about the work that we have been doing here in Kerala on Cantor's giant soft-shell turtle, which is also known as Bheemanama locally, and that's what I'm going to refer to it as throughout the talk. But before I talk about Bheemanama, let's head back a little bit and talk a little bit about wildlife conservation. Why do we need to conserve wildlife? We all, at some point of time, have had an experience with wildlife, some more than other. In our day-to-day lives, in our backyards, everywhere we go, in our homes, the geckos that are there present in our homes, that is also wildlife and biodiversity. Biodiversity is fundamental to human life on Earth. With the wildlife destroyed by us, the biodiversity destroyed by us at a rate which has never been seen in history, at a rate that we are causing the natural systems to collapse. At this time, the world is facing the deepest global disruption and health crisis of a lifetime. There is enough evidence that nature is unraveling and that our planet is flashing big red warning signs of vital nature system failure. If this balance is not restored in the coming decade, I don't think we even have a decade. We just have 7 years or so left to head back to where we were and probably have a chance at survival. If we do not do that, there is no going back. The 2020 Global Living Planet Index. So, Living Planet Index is basically a report that is put forward by WWF and Zoological Society of London every year, shows a 68% whooping decline in the monitored vertebrate species population, which for Asia region has been 45%. This decline is from 1970 to 2016, mind you. This is just 45 years of period, and we have seen a decline of almost 50%. It scares me to my core. And majority of this decline is due to the changes in land and sea use, including habitat loss and degradation. I do not have time to cover this in detail, but the report is freely available on the internet, and I think you all should go through it to understand the current situation, the grave danger that we are in. Uh, I don't think any of us are unaware of the trophy hunting and bounty hunting of large mammals, mainly tigers and lions, by the Britishers and Indian Maharajas, and it has become a symbol of wealth. It had become a symbol of wealth to decorate your house with the kills. Um, these kills were not only limited to charismatic animals like beautiful birds or tigers or lions, they were also the hunting of reptiles and amphibians in large number, and it has been going on for a long, long time. It has become so culminated in today's society that the populations of these animals have declined drastically. And even today, we see people killing these animals just because they can. This picture of the snake that is there in the corner was taken in 2018 in Uttarakhand when I was there for a field survey. I saw these people burning. This is rat snake. So they burn the rat snake for no reason, just because they can, just because they hate the snakes. Because they can't stand the snakes. And some of them actually knew that the snake is harmless, it's non-venomous. But just because people and humans can destroy the wildlife, they do that on everyday basis. And because we are responsible for such destruction and this massive biodiversity loss, it is up to us to do anything in our power to make the necessary changes and to give ourselves one more chance at survival, because at this rate our extinction is not very far away. You must have all heard of sixth extinction. That is, well, we are living in that era. uh, but that said, there are many people across the globe who are tirelessly putting all they have got to conserve the biodiversity we are left with. I'm going to quickly share some of the conservation success stories which has inspired me to do today what I do, and it has inspired many people across the globe to do what they do today. One of the biggest successful projects in India, which I think everybody know about, is Project Tiger. which was launched in 1973 when the tiger's population reduced to an all-time low of some 1,800 tigers, which were left in the wild at that time. And the government of India started this project, and they identified more than 50 tiger reserves till date, with currently India having more than 80% of the world's tiger population. And the number has risen to 3,000 tigers in the wild. This is truly inspiring because we know that people are now working for the conservation. People are now getting aware about the destruction that it can cause upon us. The second story that I'm going to share is truly inspiring, the conservation of Amur falcon. I'm sure many of you must have already heard about this. And if you haven't, I suggest you all to go watch the Pankti story. It's about a half an hour documentary which is available on YouTube in order to understand what it truly holds. So Amur falcon migrates from Russia to South Africa every year, and the Pankti village in Nagaland is the only place on earth where these raptors stop before completing their journey. It hosts the largest single congregation of these birds in the world, anywhere in the world. And until 2012, these birds were killed here in thousands. I'm talking about 18,000 to 19,000 birds every day to sell or to consume. Can you believe that this changed within 1 year? By 2013 and 2014, these hunters who were hunting down these birds in thousands became the conservationists, and today the hunting numbers have come down to zero. It is a huge accomplishment by the people of Nagaland, and which is now called as the falcon capital of the world. Next is Great Indian Bustard. It's really a sad story about how the Great Indian Bustard has been critically endangered and nearing its extinction. But recently, in 2020, we got the news that there has been a major breakthrough when 9 chicks were hatched in captivity. And this is, I think, the only chance this is left for Great Indian Bustard to survive. It has chance of survival. And captive breeding can go a really long way in conservation of these animals. One such example is California condor. When in around 1980s, the number of California condor dropped to 10 condors left in the world. The decision was made to bring them all in for captive breeding, and today more than 200 birds are there in the wild. It is not a great number, they're still critically endangered, but it's a success. It's a successful attempt to bringing them back from extinction. Chinese pangolins, they have been most trafficked mammal in the world. uh, if there is a silver lining of this pandemic, it's that the Chinese government has now given the highest protection to Chinese pangolins because they were suspected of hosting the coronavirus at intermediate host. And I think now they have been removed from the list where they were categorized to have medicinal properties. This is a big step because now the pangolins, hopefully, the pangolins will not be illegally traded as much as they were till now. These are only few success stories, and we still have a long way to go before we can relax. Edge of Existence program highlights and protects some of the most unique species on the planet, which are on the verge of extinction. It identifies the species which are evolutionarily distinct, meaning that they're unique in the way that they have evolved and have very few or no close relatives. This means that if we lose these species, we do not have anything like them in the world. This project, the Edge of Existence program, is the only global conservation initiative to focus specifically on threatened species that represent a significant amount of unique evolutionary history. The project is supported by National Geographic Photo Arc, which itself is a movement started by Joel Sartore, a brilliant man and a photographer who is on a quest to documenting all the species living in the world's zoo and wildlife sanctuaries. And in order to generate basically awareness and to give these animals voices for the conservation, so far, there have been 3 batches of National Geographic Photo Arc, if I'm not wrong. EDGE has supported many species across the globe. In India, however, it has supported 10 species of mammals, reptiles, and birds in different corners of the country. If you see this rat over here, where there's a picture, and Braveen, another EDGE fellow who is working on this species, is present here, and I just want to give him a shout out because he has been doing great work to find out the species in the wild, and there has been no picture so far documented. And I'm not sure, Braveen can confirm later if he has been able to get to see this mouse for himself. I think he has just unmuted himself.
Hey, Aishi, thank you. Now we are doing the field work, and still we are trying our best because these animals are very, last 80 years back people reported, and we are doing the field work, and we need more time to do the field work because of this pandemic. All our work got delayed. So now we are back this last month, and let's hope for best. I hope we
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank
Praveen. So, as you said, this mouse was rediscovered 8 years back, discovered 8 years back, which is a big deal. And Edge identifies these species as critical species that have to be saved now. Um, One of these species is Beemanama, Cantor's giant softshell turtle, which I'm going to talk about today. Beemanama is a very large freshwater turtle species, but before I talk more about it, I would like to give you a brief about freshwater turtles and tortoises in general. There are approximately 317 recognized species of turtles and tortoises in the world. Get this, more than 63% of these turtles and tortoises are threatened with extinction, which is extremely sad. There's such an amazing group of animals that have been given almost no or very less attention in the past. I feel very proud to say that the Ganga Brahmaputra basin in India has the world's greatest turtle species richness, which has about 20 species co-occurring in the Ganga Brahmaputra basin. When we talk about peninsular India, we have 7 species of freshwater turtles and 2 species of tortoises, and also in India, we have 3 species of endemic turtles and tortoises. Out of all 3 species are present in peninsular India. Uh, Let's talk a little bit more about the terms that I have mentioned here. That out of 7 species of freshwater turtles, 4 are soft shell, 3 are hard shell, 2 species are of tortoises. So many people, when I talk to them, I have come to know that many people outside of the field are still confused between the terms tortoises and turtles and are used interchangeably, which is not correct. However, Hannah Gatsby here perfectly describes the difference. Turtles are the cloms, turtles are the flips, tortoises. So you get the point. The tortoise's shell is hard, dome-shaped, and feet are thick, elephant-like, and they're completely terrestrial. Unlike most of the turtles, which more or less depends on water, and turtle shells are more streamlined to aid in swimming. Uh, Also, when I tell somebody for the first time that I work on turtles I'm interested in turtles, they unconsciously picture a sea turtle. Marine turtles are the sea-dwelling turtles which have flippers and not the limbs, like the freshwater turtles. In here, the turtle here photographed here, the freshwater turtle here is a black turtle, which is very commonly found in India. The feet of the freshwater turtles are often webbed. Uh, I recently did a small survey in Kerala, online survey, and not to my surprise, many people weren't aware of anything like a soft shell turtle. For them, turtle or tortoises are the animals with the shell, with a hard shell. The shell of these soft shell turtles do not have a hard shell with scales, but they have a bony shell with a leathery skin cover instead. And they are mostly strong swimmers than their hard shell siblings, and they're very aggressive in nature, which I think is probably because of the reason that they're more vulnerable to be injured due to the lack of the hard shell. The shell of hard shell turtles are, as the name suggests, it's hard and it's bony. They have bony exoskeleton. The hard shell turtles mostly are herbivores, while the soft shell turtles are mostly omnivores, feeding mainly on the even on the dead and decaying matter in the river, and turtles are mostly responsible for cleaning the river systems. So if you ever see a freshwater turtle or a tortoise, don't forget to submit your observation to citizen science portals. There are many portals online these days, but for India right now, one of the platforms that I use is Indian Biodiversity Portal. So you can always submit your observation. Just click a picture. If you can't click a picture, just submit your observation on this portal. It helps us collect the data on turtles throughout the country. Bhimarama, as you can see here, falls in the category of a soft shell turtle. In Kerala, we have three species of soft-shell turtle. Why I'm talking about Kerala is because I am working in Kerala. I'm working in the northern part of Kerala in the Kasaragod district, and I'm working. The study river is Payasini River. It is also known as Chandragiri River system in Kasaragod. As I was saying, the three species of soft-shell turtles in Kerala, these three species are Indian flap-shell turtle, Leith's soft-shell turtle, which is endemic to India, and Cantor's giant soft-shell turtle, which is Palapuvan. Uh, Indian flapshell turtle is one of the most common soft-shell turtles in India and is present throughout the Indian subcontinent. It is a smaller turtle. It grows only up to 35 centimeter or so, and I get a lot of requests of identification. And most of the time, when it's a soft-shell turtle, it's Indian flapshell turtle. How can you identify that it's a flapshell turtle? It's through the flaps. If you see the center picture, you can see the flaps which are present. Even the third picture, you can see the limbs are kind of going in the flaps, and the turtle has the ability to completely conceal itself within its shell. So that is why it is called Indian flapshell turtle. Locally in Kerala, it is known as Vella Ama. I think it is because of the white color of the plastron. The lower portion of the underpart of the turtle is called plastron. Um, this here is Leith's soft-shell turtle. This is a very beautiful turtle, a large turtle that can grow up to 70 centimeter, and this mostly inhabits the large river systems and reservoirs. As I said, it is endemic to India, the peninsular region. The identification is fairly simple for the species because they have this identifiable red marks on the head and the yellow spot that you can see on the upper lip. So they're pretty identifiable. They're very beautiful, and it's rare. The species is vulnerable in as of IUCN status. Next up is a rock star, Mr. Bhiman Ama. This term was coined, the Bhiman Ama term was coined by Dr. Jafar Palot from Zoological Society of India when he realized that there was no local name for Kerala, for this turtle in Kerala. He gave the name due to the extremely large size of this turtle. It is one of the largest freshwater turtles in the world. There are about six large freshwater soft-shell turtles, and Bhimanama is one of them. Interestingly, the turtle has another local name, which only very few people in Kasargod know it by, which is known as Palapuvan. I think it's because of the nose that looks like the flower of this white flower called Pala in Malayalam. In India, in the past 45 years, only 15 individual records, 15 individual records have been reported to be seen. Our study is the first ever studied or focused on this rare and large and unusual species, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some crucial questions in order to understand the species more and in order to conserve the species in India and throughout the world. It is one of the three species that are present in the genus Peloculus. In spite of a very large size, it is so shocking to learn that not many people have any knowledge about the existence of this species. It's so large that you can't not see it if it comes up in the river. That just shows that how rare this species is. When I started my search for Bhimanama, I quickly realized that it is going to be very hard for me to be able to see this beauty. I started talking to people in Kerala where the turtle had been previously reported from. So to just give a brief, the turtle before our study was previously reported from Kozhikode district in Kerala, where it was reported in 2010. But only a handful of people actually know about the existence of the species, and even fewer people have seen this giant for themselves. So turtles are known to bask in the sun mainly to get because they regulate their body heat with the temperature. So in areas with a lot of turtles, like in the Brahmaputra basin, you can see them basking on the riverbank with their legs like fully extended, like they're relaxing on the beach. But for Bhimanama, I don't think it likes relaxing on the beach as much. There have been no records of this turtle basking, and the people who have seen the turtle have never seen them basking in the sun, which makes this species even more secretive than it already is. However, what we know is that it likes to spend a lot of time buried under the sand, submerged deep inside the river. Bhimanama is also known to be a very aggressive species, but at the same time, very shy. Now, remember when I say shy, I mean very, very shy. Any small disturbance in the water body, say you throw a stone, or if there's a person speaking on the riverbank, any feeble sound in the riverbank, and whoop, it goes back into the river. There are ample things that we don't know about Bhimanama yet. One of a few of which are the movement pattern, how it moves in the river, where does it live, what are its preference for the habitat, where does it go in the monsoons, where does it bask at all? There's a lot to answer if we just start looking for them. In May 2019, when we first went to this disconnected deep pool. This is the deep pool in the right hand side corner that I'm talking about. It is the study area where I'm studying. When we first went there, there was a case where a lot of fishes turned up dead. Like some 100 fishes turned up dead due to what is supposedly increased by biological oxygen demand. Somebody had reported that they might have seen a large coracle-like thing, like a large ama means turtle, a large turtle feeding on these fishes in the pool, the dead fishes. I wasn't very hopeful at first, and Dr. Jaffer told me to go have a look at the scene. And I, along with some few people from KFRI, Kerala Forest Research Institute, went there, and with the local people, we were excited to see what this large turtle could be. We spent almost 9 hours looking for the turtle for the first day, but we had no luck. We came back again the next day, and after a couple of hours of waiting, a head pops up suddenly, like a small, like you can see in the picture if I turn it back. The second picture was the first picture I took of the turtle, from the back. So a head is popping up from the water, and it's breaking the water surface, and I quickly tried to capture as many shots as I can. Mind you, the turtle is only coming out for 4 to 5 seconds. After few attempts and some 5 sightings in a day, where we're sitting in near the rivers on the river bank for hours, we were able to confirm that it indeed was Bhimanama. It indeed was Cantor's giant softshell turtle, and hooray! It was a day I'm never going to forget. You have to see it to believe it. So a Bhimanama is an ambush feeder. Ambush feeder means sit and wait a technique where they just wait for the prey to pass by in order to feed. In the history, in the previous studies in India and abroad, Bhimanama is known to feed on mainly fishes, crabs, mollusks, in addition to plant matter as well. Softshell turtles are also known to feed on dead and decaying matter, thereby cleaning our river systems and making our river systems healthy. And that is why they're most important to for the health of our rivers, aquatic water bodies. And if the turtles are lost, then we might as well ending up losing our river systems, and which will severely affect human beings. They have a large distribution throughout the South and Southeast Asia. They occur in almost 11 countries, but it is extremely threatened all over its range. And in some places, it is even considered locally extinct. Um, it is very weird to think that such an unusual species has not received much attention of national and international media, scientists, conservationists. There are, however, some work that has been done uh, on the species in China and Cambodia. WCS Cambodia, I think, has dedicated efforts in the past decade towards the conservation of this species. It has made headlines where they have initiated community-based protection for the nesting grounds, and they protected the active nests with the eggs, which resulted in more than 800 hatchlings in Mekong River. It is a big step towards the conservation of the species. I hope to do similar work and raise awareness in India as well by involving the community in the protection of this turtle. IUCN Red List has listed the species as endangered. However, there are no population studies that has been done for the turtle, except I think in Cambodia. I'm not sure. I think in Cambodia, where they have been focusing on the conservation of Bhimanama for quite some time. And since the population studies have not been conducted, the status of IUCN needs to be updated. It needs to be checked, because still it can be doubtful. The species Bhimanama is known from a variety of habitats of freshwater turtle and brackish water habitats. Now, for a freshwater turtle, it is unusual and it is rare for the turtles to enter in estuarine conditions. But this turtle is among the very few freshwater turtles who have the affinity to live in estuarine conditions, and that I think can be one of the reasons for its large distribution throughout Asia. This is well documented. I mean, there have been sightings in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, in Odisha, in Bengal, where the turtle has been seen from estuarine conditions. However, there are almost no studies supporting this particular argument, not particular notion that the species is also present in the estuarine conditions in other parts of its range in the world. And therefore, it will be interesting to be able to follow this turtle through scientific advancement technologies like telemetry studies, which have been so popular lately. And I think this is one of the steps that we can take to understand the species in a much better way. Uh, Through this project, we had 5 main objectives. These objectives were put together to systematically collect information, baseline information, yet very crucial information for the giant turtle. The first objective was to collect or gather local ecological knowledge. Now, I am going to refer to it as LEK. So, LEK is the knowledge and beliefs that have been handed down through generations, the knowledge that local people possess about the ecosystem and about the species that they are living in close proximity with. Scientists and researchers, they come and go, honestly, to understand and uncover the truths and to write reports, to give the suggestions on conservation. But the indigenous people and local communities have known these truths, this knowledge, they have this data in the back of their minds for ages. The importance of LEK has now been widely accepted and recognized throughout the world. Through LEK, we wanted to understand the historical and current distribution of Bhimanama in Kerala, how the population has changed over the years, how the river use patterns might be corresponding with the frequency of finding a turtle, how the information possessed by locals varied with their occupation, their age, their community. We also wanted to gather information on nesting, uh, information on sighting, information on habits of Bhimanama, information on feeding and movement. And we wanted to collect these crucial ecological knowledge from the local people. So once we gathered this information, we wanted to use this information to see whether the species is present in the study area to this day or not, or whether the species is locally extinct. Once we know that the species is present in the river, we wanted to use this presence information to identify the critical habitat areas of the species. Critical habitat areas are those areas that are important, that are very, very important, that are critical to the survival of the species. Areas which, if are destroyed, can cause severe damage to Bhimanama populations. Fourth objective was to identify threats. I will talk a little bit more about this in detail in a few minutes. Uh, and then the next objective was CEPA. CEPA stands for Communication, Education, and Public Awareness, which is one of the most important part of my project. I hope, and I have been successful somewhat to involve as many people as I can and spread awareness about Bhimanama. I want to at least bring the local and national focus on this turtle. I think it deserves a lot more, but for now, I think this local and national focus on this turtle is extremely necessary. It's extremely crucial if we want to start working towards the conservation of the species. I will give a little bit more information about each of these in the coming slides. So, to gather local ecological knowledge, we first found out people who have reported in the past to have seen Bhimanama. We conducted semi-structured interviews, and in a successful attempt, we were able to form a network with the local people. We included more and more key informants in our network. We talked to more people through our interviews. They suggested some people who might have seen it in the past. These interviews were done in the least invasive manner, and we tried and we gave our interviewees, our respondents, all the information of why we are needing this, why we are collecting this data, why we want them to come aboard on our focus of conserving this turtle. These interviews to gather local ecological knowledge was a great way of learning for me, and it has helped me understand the value of social sciences in conservation. This is still a budding field, and not many scientists ecological scientists are using social science data, but every day it is getting more and more popular. People are starting to recognize the importance of local ecological knowledge. Our interviews sometimes would go on for 1 to 2 hours with just one person. This is because they had a lot of fascinating things to share with us, and some very, very funny things. A little hard to believe sometimes, but the locals were always so welcoming. They were always singing the tales of Bhimanama wherever they knew about it. Some folks even told me that they have seen Bhimanama, 100 kilo, 1 meter long turtle, porpoising. Porpoising is basically what the dolphin does, coming out of the water surface and jumping. That means they're playing. The local people told me that they play by jumping out of the water. Well, I would absolutely love to see that sight. If that happens, I would love that. And that would be the day of my life. Some told us that the turtles come out on the full moon night to lay eggs. And some other people told us that once they caught a huge turtle which was around 1.5 meters in length, and 4 or 5 strong men tried to hold on to that one huge Bhimanama, and they sat on it to catch it from going back to water. Basically, they wanted to eat the turtle. And it was so strong that it pulled those 4 to 5 men into the river while they were piggybacking on the back of the turtle, and they had to let go of the turtle to save their lives. It's very interesting, and some what is the most interesting thing is much of the information that they shared with us is scientifically backed, and I only wonder how much more amazing information is stored in the back of the minds of these people. It is amazing to interact with these communities. It shows us how less we know and how much more we have to learn from them. We conducted visual surveys in order to confirm the presence of the Bhimanama in the study area. However, we were only able to make a couple of sightings, but that was a great experience. We also used our alert network to ask our informants to share their recent sightings with us and any information on the turtle which might be helpful to us. We visited local fishers regularly to see if there are any bycatches in the nets and hooks, because that is one way that we can know for sure. They tend to be caught in incidental catches a lot. So that is one way to know whether the turtle is still present in the river or not. One thing to mention here is that the targeted fishing for turtle is not very common. It is, in fact, not many people go to fish for the turtle. It is mostly the accidental catches that make their way into the fishing gears, which is then mostly sold to people and consumed. However, this is because the local people do not know the importance of, they know, but they are unaware of the fact that if this species is lost, what is going to cost it to what it is going to cost us to us as humans. So with awareness programs, I believe that it can be highly effective to save Bhimanama. I'll talk about threats now. We have identified a few threats through interviews and also through visual surveys that we were able to witness for ourselves. Uh, Unscientifically constructed dams and check dams pose a great danger to the turtle habitat by altering the course of river, changes water quality, and changes annual flood cycles, which put the turtles at risk. So these structures you can see, the check dams you can see in various parts of the river, and those change the course of the river, and they also change water quality, which can be harmful for the species for its survival. Also, one of the greatest threat that we have been able to see for ourselves is the ever expanding industry of agriculture, the irrigation. It poses a major threat to the habitat of the turtle. The study area is extensively used for irrigation, continuously drawing water from the river and hence changing and altering the natural river flow. Irrigation also causes soil erosion and therefore affecting the sandbanks on which these turtles depend gravely for nesting. One study, I think, on the snapping turtle in the US suggested that due to the shade provided by the agricultural crops, the turtle come and nest there because they want to nest in the place where there's shade, because it's much cooler, the soil is loose. So because of the shade, the okay, for those of you who don't know, the turtle sex determination is dependent on temperature. So temperature determines the sex of the hatchlings. So if the temperature is low, there'll be male turtles, and if the temperature is higher than 31 degrees, then there'll be female turtles. So because of the shade that is provided by the agriculture, the sex ratio altered. resulting in more males than females, which created an imbalance in the sex ratio of the species. This happened for snapping turtles, and it might be happening for other species as well. There has not been studies to say that for sure, but it has been seen for other turtles. Uh, Apart from this, the turtles often find themselves, as I said, they often find themselves in the hooks and nets of fisher people, and they often end up getting sold for their meat or either getting consumed, which I believe can be changed with education and awareness. And the more the people we bring in for conservation, the more it is going to change the perspective of local people. Sand mining, illegal sand mining, the unregulated, unchecked sand mining on the riverbanks destroy the nesting grounds, which withholds the future of the species. And in some cases, the sand mining is again just changing the structure of the river, and in many cases, it destroys the nest directly of Bhimanama. And it has been noted. We have got this information through our local surveys that because of sand mining, they've seen eggs which were probably of Vimanama, and it was destroyed because of the sand mining. Now that we have identified the threats, we can come up with ways and systematic methods to counter these threats and protect the home of Bhimanama while protecting the livelihood of these people, the livelihood of local people. One of the change in which we can bring about change towards the conservation of Bhimanama and how to involve people in the conservation is SEPA, um, which stands for Communication, Education, and Public Awareness. SEPA requires a strategic approach to understand where to direct your focus, when to direct your focus, and how to involve people in the conservation. What are the different ways to do it? Communications can be done through magazines, newspapers, news channels, journal articles, radio, social media, television. There's so many ways to do it, and so many ways in which it can be made effective. Educating, the second is education. So educating the local, the students, the budding ecologists, volunteers, interns is also a great way to shape minds and to involve similar minds in conservation of Bhimanama and to learn from each other. This right now, this webinar is one form of education, and I hope some of you might be able to join me in the field sometime, and we can probably help each other and learn why it is absolutely crucial to save Bhimanama now that we have time. We still have time. Next up is public awareness. Public awareness can be done through different campaigns and with one focus of involving as many people as possible, directly working for the conservation of Bhimanama. Sadly, because of COVID, like for many others, it has ruined a lot of plans as well as to run campaigns for Bhimanama. However, it is not going to last forever, and we are going to come back stronger and dive right back into it. Um, so what was our aim? What is the aim that we're looking forward to? What are the future directions? So with this project, we want to ensure long-term community-based conservation of Bhimanama. The similar effort that I have discussed before that have been taken by different countries for different species. And I think community-based conservation is the only key going forward because the local communities have to live there. The local communities have to coexist with the Bhimanama and other turtles and tortoises. So that is the way to go forward about the conservation of these species. Population estimation study is again very important. As I said, there's no population estimation study, and how we need that to update the IUCN status. Once we know the IUCN status, we can go about giving a species action plan and survival plan accordingly. Next is nest protection programs. These are the things that are needed immediately to be able to protect the well-being of the future generations of this turtle. We can outline a conservation action plan. Basically, conservation action plan, you outline strategic steps and directions towards conservation and protection for the species, involving concerned communities and stakeholders to minimize the effects of various threats that I just listed in a few minutes back. Then through this project, we also wanted to collect baseline information to be able to do further ecological research on the species. I mentioned a few questions that I have in mind, like to understand where it is moving, what is its home range, and there are like lot more questions that can be done only when we collect the baseline information. So I think this was it for the Bhimanama part. I want to also talk a little bit about what can you as a student, as a researcher, as a conservationist do if you want to begin your journey in this field. These are not the standard steps, and there are many other ways to go about it. I'm just going to talk about what worked for me. So if there is any other way, if there are any other advice that you want to follow, please go ahead. But this is what I worked for me. The first is, and I think this is very important, is join an ongoing project. Any project. Join as a research intern, join as a volunteer, a research student, a field assistant. Join as anything, any position. Join for any position in a project that interests you. Because in the long way, when you work with a team, when you work under some supervisor, when you work under the supervision of people who know about the field, you learn how to come up with your objectives. You know how to work your way through those objectives. You know how to conduct research. You know how to collect data. You know how to do the analysis. You know how to write those results and submit the results and publish. So once you know all these things, you are ready to go and begin your own journey by applying for grants. If, however, this is not the standard way, as I said, so if you're confident enough that you have a solid question, you know what you want to do, and you know you can manage the other parts of handling the project, allocating the budget and everything, then you can go ahead and apply for your own research or conservation grant. There are many ways in which you can apply for research and conservation, and there are hundreds of grants which are tailor-made for you if you just look for them properly. There are grants for travel as well to conferences. There are grants for doing your master's or PhD program. There are grants for research, the grant for conservation, the grants for educating, the grants for storytelling. You go to places and Nat Geo provides a storytelling grant. Where you can go around and make your story and present the story to the world. If you want to join an ongoing project, Google. Everything is right in front of you, on your screen, on your laptop, in your hand. You just Google and find out the opportunities which might be suitable for you. Use the social media superpower. Yes. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I would say Instagram and Twitter have worked very well for me. I've come to know about people who are working in different species all around the world, and I've been able to connect to them through these platforms. And I would suggest, if you're not on social media, use social media for that purpose, to just know about the work that has been going on in the world. There's a lot good as well that is happening. In India, we have a group called Yeti. So if you just subscribe to that group, I have put the link over here. You can take the screenshot, or maybe you can write to me later and I would send you the link. So you can just click this link. You can subscribe to Yeti, and they post opportunities on and off on the mail you. So you'll know what is where people are looking for giving you the opportunity to work. So you can subscribe and you can see what works for you. And one thing that has worked for very well for me is to write to people. I googled a lot. I saw the profiles of people whose work interests me, and then I wrote to those people. And most often than not, they reply and they return. If you just show that you're passionate about and you're serious about what you're saying, they write back to you, and that worked a lot for me. And they don't necessarily give you the opportunity, but they can help you, guide you through the process of finding a good project for yourself. And similarly, if you want to look for research and grant opportunities, there are many online databases. I have listed a few. You can check National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS's website. They have a list of grants that are there for each and every level, for a PhD level, for a MSc level, national grants, international grants, grants for women, grants for Asia, Africa, grants for primates. There are like lots. So if you can just go to this link that I have given over here, and you can check those grants that have been listed down. Then there is Terra Viva and Funds for Nat Geo. You can again go to their website and check. They have listed, Terra Viva and Funds for Nat Geo they specifically list the grant opportunities. They send you the email for reminders. It is great. These are great initiatives. Conservation Leadership Program website, you can also check their website. In this, there's a window there's a tab where it says that more grant opportunities. CLP itself is a grant where you have to apply as a team, 3 or 4 people, and you have to come do a research conservation project. I'm sorry. And then in the website they've listed other grants which you can apply. And Then again, Google and social media. I could not stress more about how important social media, especially platforms like Twitter, where there are lots of people talking about their work every day, and they're giving you the opportunities, they're posting opportunities over there. And if you're not there, I would suggest you join and you try and connect to those people. Uh, Keys of writing a grant proposal. Again, this is what worked for me. This is not a standard key that is there anywhere. This is what worked for me, and I've listed it out for you in case you want to apply for a grant proposal. So first, what you have to do is identify the project purpose. Why do you want to work on the species, and what do you want to do? Not necessarily a species, for a habitat, for a aquatic habitat, marine habitat, or for primates, or for conservation or for education. What is the purpose of your project? What do you want to do? So then you find donors through the websites that through the ways that I've just listed down. You find the grant opportunities, the donors that are best suitable for you. Best suitable for you, by this I mean, see the eligibility, see whether you are eligible to apply or not. Check the limitations of funding agencies. Every funding agency has a limitation. It has a limitation of time, experience that they demand. Sometimes they demand for early conservationists. For example, H Fellowship is an early conservationist grant, which finds the people who are just starting out their career, and they fund those people. For in my case, H Fellowship funded. I had only a very few or less experience, and they funded me. And for other people who are for other funding agencies, they want a minimum year of experience. Some funding agencies only fund for a specific geographical area, some for only specific animal group like primates, and some only for reptiles, some only for uh, mammals. I don't know. So there are, you get the point, right? So do you need to be do you have to see that whether you need to be affiliated to an organization, or can it just be an independent or individual grant? Then you check on their website what kind of projects they support, whether they support research project, whether they support conservation project or education project or any other thing that you want to do. See if your interest align with their interest. See if they still are accepting application or not. Check the deadline. You need time to come up with a good grant proposal, so make a plan accordingly. Give your application some time and check the deadline and work accordingly. Check their application format. Most of the grant agencies have different application formats, so work your application in that format. And check the grant size, very important. Check whether, and work a rough budget. See whether the money that they're giving is enough for your work or not. Is it more, is it less? I think one of the very important step is to find a supervisor. You have to have a good supervisor. You don't have to have, I think many people apply independently, I'm not sure, but I think you need a supervisor to back you up, to help you through the process. It can be a hard process, and it can be a long time consuming process. So if you have a supervisor, you will know what you're doing, and he or she will support you writing your application, working your proposal, and then submitting that proposal, and hopefully you'll be able to uh, get a grant. There are many rejections in the grant when you apply for a grant, so don't learn from each grant. Learn from the comments that they share with you, and with each application, you'll only get better. So thank you. I hope it helped. And if you have any questions about the project, you can always go to the website Edge of Existence. Check out their website. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And if you have any more further questions that you want me to explain to you in detail, maybe write to me on the email ID that I've given here, hashtag Save Bhimanama. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ayushi. That was very informative. Now we are open for the discussion session. You can ask your doubts and questions. You can use the chat option.
All right.
Ayushi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much for your nice presentation. In fact, we would love to see the Bhimanama. So the School of Advanced Studies, we are just a call away, like for any sort of spreading the message to the public or to the local fishing community, etc. We will be happy to do it along with you. So keep us in mind.
Thank you so much.
It's a wonderful talk. It's very good for the students. I think they will have a wonderful opportunity to explore all these fields for funding opportunities. They can try for it. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I will definitely contact you, and that would be a great help for me because in Kerala it gets hard for me sometimes because I don't know the language. But yeah,
Yes,
thank you
yes.
so much for saying that. It
We,
means a lot.
we have many of our students working in, I mean, from their natives of North Kerala. So naturally, they'll be of help to you.
Yeah.
We are
Okay.
ready to volunteer.
Yes.
And
Yes.
together we can go for extension programs.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I would love to have people who are interested and come talk to me whenever you want. I'm always up for a chat, and I'll help the way other people have helped me through this process. There are like a lot of people who have helped me reaching where I am. So I want to give it like other people have for me. And so please feel free to reach me.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Sandeep. I can say I can see your comment. Thank you for your kind words. Being someone from different part of the country, how do you find Kerala as a researcher? I find Kerala amazing, and the people of Kerala, especially, they have been so kind to me, and they never saw me as an outsider. And whenever I reached them, and they could see that I'm struggling to talk because I don't know the language. But they helped me through it, and they were so kind to me, and I love the food. So yeah, it has been great, and I think if somebody from outside wants to come in Kerala and work, you should definitely go for it. It's an amazing place. And yeah, also, what was the most challenging thing that you encountered during your edge work? One of the most challenging thing was to start, of course, because I was clueless when I started. But again, you find people who support you, and then I think that's something that I still struggle with is the language. I am trying to learn, but it's a long way. And for everything else, I think I have you people. I have you. I have my supervisors. I have many other people who help me through every question that I have. So that's the thing. So there is Archana has asked a question. I'm curious to know if you understand the local language. Yes, so I think I have. Uh, I think yeah. I mean, I think I've answered this question. Can you judge when some local is exaggerating? So, um, so in my experience, the locals have been very on point, and they have always given me information which was believable. In other places, I have seen people who get a lot of more information which is not necessarily believe. You're talking about the surveys, right? There's an interview. So in my case, many people only give the information that was actually beneficial and that could be used, and that I could not say that they're faking it because that was clearly the genuine information that they're giving me. Some people try to give the size big, but it's how we, even when I talk about the turtle, I say it's very big, but you find the smaller ones also. You find juvenile, and if you see the juvenile, you might say, oh, you're exaggerating. So I would not say that. Vinod uncle has asked me a question. Does Kerala high literacy help your efforts? Yes, it certainly does. It definitely does. And I think literacy has a lot to do with how people interact with each other, how people help you in the process. So it definitely does. Um, Prabha ma'am has asked, okay, thank you so much, Prabha. Mayam Shukla, did you see any age-related difference in ecological knowledge or perception about the people? Yeah, so it was definitely there. The people who were older, who were above the age of 50 or 40, knew more about the species, and they knew that it was historically at least present. It didn't know that whether it's still present or not. They knew that historically the turtle has been there in the river, and people who were above a certain age group like 65, 70, they even, some of them even told me interesting information on nesting, and they have documented that, not documented, but they have seen it for themselves in the few, like some 3 to 4 decades back. So definitely there was a perception, there was a clear difference I could see between the people of different age groups. So yeah. I hope I answered your question. Is there any superstitions about the turtle? Not that I have come across anything. It is more of a cultural practice for some communities that they eat the turtle, but there is no superstitions as such. Not that I have come across. They in For some groups in the study area, they eat the turtle as a delicacy. Historically, they have been known to eat the turtle as a delicacy. So that is there, but not superstitions about the turtle. Not many people know about it in the first place. Yeah, only some 150 people I spoke to who might have or might not have heard about it. Thank you, Anju. Thank you, Abhilasha. I hope I have answered all your questions, and if there's any more questions, please write to me wherever, connect to me with social media. Okay, Madhuraj has asked me, can you elaborate on the influence of temperature on sex determination? Like in almost all the turtle species, whether it's marine or freshwater, there are, I think, different type of sex determination, like from genes, that is in mammals, and in reptiles it happens, it is mainly temperature dependent. So when the temperature is lower than 31 degrees, there are male hatchlings, and when the temperature is more than 31 degrees, it is female hatchlings. I can't go into the science of it because I honestly can't explain it right now, but I can definitely get back to you on this. But I do not know the exact what physiological conditions, what happens inside the turtle, like to be able to for this. So I'm sure there are more papers on this. I can read and I can get back to you on this. Archana Varan has asked that, is it illegal to keep any common turtle species? Yes, under the Indian Wildlife Act, it is illegal to keep any turtle native to India in your homes or under captivity. Under captivity, if some organization, if they have the permits, they can do that, if for the conservation, but you can't keep it as pets. Yeah, so that's illegal. So what are the difficulties you faced during your initial time? Because I came from a different state, and this was the first project that I was handling on my own. It took me time to understand where should I start from, who do I talk to, arranging the ways to go to other places, talk to people, find interns, because I didn't have a established project, so I could not get any interns or volunteers and then have them face difficulty during their learning process. It took me some 2 to 3 months to learn how to cope and how to start with my project. So yeah, it was mainly how to plan your project in your head beforehand and write everything down. But when you're writing a project, just write every step. No step is smaller to write. Shirag, you were wondering about the acoustic studies on turtle. Is there any way to communicate in the water? I have no idea. There have been no studies that have been done to understand the communication on turtles, especially freshwater turtles, and that too soft shell. So I don't know. I don't know about the communication underwater. There's a lot to know. There's a lot that has not been done on turtles, and there's definitely something worth exploring. So thank you for your question. Did you find Bhimanama in many other rivers in Kasaragod other than Chandragiri? No, Anju. I just surveyed one river so far. I tried surveying one of the other tributary of the same river, but we did not find any Bhimanama there. But majority of our time we spent in only one river system. So I can't say that whether they're present there or no, because I've not done surveys over there. Okay, Ria, what are the present challenges you face on your research on Bhimanama? Present is COVID-19. COVID-19 is the worst, not the worst, it is the worst, but yeah, it has basically, we have lost one entire season, and this was the year we were supposed to do a lot of data collection to be able to complete this project, but it was halted because of COVID-19. And because the project is established and we have now people backing us, there are local people who are now in the alert network. They still call and they still tell me if they have anything to share. So I am at home and I want to go back to field, but let's see when will that happen. Thank you so much, Jaikumar sir. I mean, it means a lot that you were here to listen to my presentation. Thank you, Praveen. How many Bhimanama have you cited so far? Anjali, there's a paper coming on that probably by next year. And hopefully you'll be able to read it there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share that information right now here. But you can, we have submitted reports and probably it will be published soon. Hopefully it will be published soon. What are the most important points we need to check on while looking forward to a project? I think I discussed that in my presentation. What are the most some of the most important points that you have to have is what is your question. Figure out a question that you want to work on. Lay down the methods. Write down every point that you might need to achieve those objectives. See what is possible, what is not possible. Read a lot of papers on the similar studies that might have been there, that might be present there. Use Google and just read those papers and read that data that is already available and see how you can go forward with that project. Do Bhimanama migrate? I don't know. I can't say because we have not done movement study. And again, as I mentioned, I want to do it in the future. And the project has only been going on for a year, and I hope to do a lot of things. But and hopefully know about this. I don't know whether the Bhimanama migrate. We do not have studies so far that say whether it does or does not. We know that it might be moving a lot of distance in summer months, especially when they have to take refuge in the deep pool areas. When the river system dries, they come to the deep pool areas and take refuge over there. So they might be moving quite some distance, but I don't know whether they migrate or not. Uh, are those all the questions? I mean, do anybody else have any more questions for me? Thank you so much.
Mrs. Ayushi Jain, we are thankful to you for delighting us by giving a very illuminating talk on Bhimanama. And initially, when our Dr. Suja Devi Priya mentioned about the name, it was a little bit confusing, and we related it to Bhiman, and some critical discussion came. And later she clarified that the name is Bhimanama. It is a new term and a new word and a new idea and a new concept, and it is an affection. You took us to the natural landscape of Kerala through this giant living creature, and we are very much indebted to you. And a formal vote of thanks will be delivered by Dr. Suja Devi Priya. And we are so much insightful to have some kind of interaction with you between the school and your academic credential and your innovative research contributions in future perspectives of the school, and formulating our academics with respect to ecology. And we have some plan in our mind to offer some courses on ecology and the field biology and the conservation biology. And in that respect, this is the first innovative lecture by a researcher from a distinguished institution. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for your kind words, sir. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Hello, Ayushi Jain.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Dr. Anand, the Faculty of School of Environment Studies.
Hello, sir.
Oh, yeah, it was a very informative talk, and what I feel is that basically things come from your heart, because to be an biologist and to look after the nature, you have to have a passion into that. Apart from getting the project and other things, all those are technical things. But we personally, we should have a passion over that, and that's what we have seen in you. And what I feel is that we need to have more ICJs, to conserve our biological system, biodiversity. So more people like ICO has to come into this particular field, and then we have to do something, to preserve the left out species. So your talk was very well structured. You started with the importance of conserving biodiversity, and then you cautioned us that what going to happen, if
Yeah.
this trend is being continued, and then you shared some what you call success stories about conservation, and
Yeah.
you are part of that. And we are very glad that you are working in Kerala. And as
Thank you so
Sudha
much,
ma'am
sir.
said that our students also would like to support you in your work. They would like to volunteer things, and we want to also direct our students, to work in this particular direction, okay, with the passion of art. And one thing I want to ask you that I came to know that from childhood days you are interested to study in turtles.
From childhood.
Yeah.
So, sir, I have not grown up near nature, and I live in a place where there's no trees or much biodiversity around.
Mm.
And I was interested. I used to look at geckos and agamas that are there in the backyard, but I never thought that I would be working. I didn't know till my 10th standard and 9th standard that there is a field called wildlife research conservation, where I can go and put my efforts. It was only in my bachelor's that I realized that there's a full field where people actually working with animals, and it really interested me how many the field is only few people in the country are there. It's still a very small field, and there's still like lots of people that are coming in every day, and every year you see a lot of people who are interested and who is coming up nowadays. And it was not gradual. From in my case, it was more because I talked to people, similar-minded people, that I came to know that there's a field and that something I want to do. I always loved animals, but yeah, it was only after my bachelor that I knew that okay, I have to go in this direction now.
Okay. What made you to study turtles?
What made me start? So it's quite a funny story. So turtles, I had never seen one turtle until 2015, if you can believe that. So I never saw one turtle for myself. I only heard about it, and I always wanted to see turtles. And I loved Ghadials. This is a separate issue. I loved Ghadials, so I did an internship in an organization, Turtle Survival Alliance. I did an internship there because I wanted to work with gharials, and they had gharials in their center. So I wanted to see gharials. And when I started working in that organization, I developed an interest for turtles. I saw the turtles for myself. I saw the turtles for first, and I had the duty to go feed the turtles, and I just fell in love with them. I think that was the point where yeah, I wanted to continue with what I started.
Okay, Aish. And as during the discussion, somebody asked you that is there is any myth behind
Yeah.
that. And what I feel is that in some temples in South India, I don't know in North India there, uh, we have a statue of this turtle, in front of that devotee. So you can just search into that. Why they kept the turtle there?
So I think turtles have been historic because in Hindu culture, turtles are a symbol of because it's a Vishnu avatar. Turtles are worshipped in many parts of the country. Even in North India, because it's the avatar of Lord Vishnu. It has been people worship the turtles. But when it comes to whether they think that Bhimarama is bringing them luck or no, this is still not clear because I've not looked into that perspective. But there are many other temple ponds that are there in the country. In the temple you go, there are ponds where people come and feed the turtles, and people bring the injured turtles you see on the road maybe. And I have visited similar temple ponds in Kasargod a couple of times, and I've seen how the priest there would uh, worship them and give them food once a day. But other than that, for Bhimanama specifically, I've not come across any of the misconceptions, or not misconceptions, but superstitious nature.
I saw one last question. Your final stage of the project, like creating the awareness for other things. How people are taking it up? Are they really worried about the species, or what do you feel about that?
So I think that the people I have spoken to, so I have involved at least 400 people in total so far, from workshops, from interviews, through webinars or seminars, or getting interns in my project. So far it has been very welcoming. People who I go to and I talk to, they actually listen to what I have to say, and if they don't agree, they say that they don't agree with that. But many people actually realize that the turtle has not been seen for years in this place, and this might be correlated to what we as humans are doing over there. So I think this is because this year I was supposed to do a lot of communication and awareness work. So I couldn't. I only so far I conducted only one workshop, and that was very successful. People turned up. They actually listened to what I said, and it was very well achieved, and it was a successful workshop. But this year I couldn't do a lot more that I wanted to do. So far I would say that people have been paying attention to what I have to say, and they are putting forward their ideas as well. And some people actually go up to saying that they are willing to come and join me in the cause. Some local people, these are local people I'm talking about. These people come and tell me that they want to keep that contact with me, and they want to tell me when something happens. They want to bring in people. So that's really heartwarming to see.
Okay, thank you, Aisha, very much. Thank you very much, and for enlightening our gathering.
Thank
And
you so much.
I wish that this will be a way of interest for our students now, because we have a lot of women students, so they may be interested in this particular line. And thank you very much, Aisha. And
Thank you so much.
we like to have a physical meeting with you maybe after this.
Definitely, sir. I would love that. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
to come to our department, and then we can have coffee.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aishi. Your presentation was wonderful and you shared with us a lot of information. Thank you so much. The tale of Vimanama was very interesting, and we extend all our support for your future works too. Wishing
Thank
you
you.
all the success.
Hi, Arishi. This is Dr. Preeti.
Hi, Dr. Preeti.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you have done a very excellent presentation, Arishi. It was very nice.
Thank
And
you so
I
much.
want to really appreciate your hard work as well as sincerity. It
Thank you
means
so much, ma'am.
even if you want to, you are searching for a new native species, right? And I can understand without knowing the local language how difficult it will be to find out the
Yes.
information regarding this native species. I think this native species of Demanama is only found in Kerala.
Sorry, ma'am. Can you say that again?
This Demanama is only found in Kerala.
No, Bhimanama is actually found in 11 countries in Asia and Southeast Asia. I said in my
Okay.
presentation that it has a large distribution. In India, it is found in Tamil Nadu, I think in 6 states: Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, and Kolkata. I mean West Bengal. So
Okay.
it is there in this species. But the reason I chose Kerala was because the last reported sighting was from Kerala, and most number of records were from Kerala. So it was the
Okay.
best chance for me to come and be able to work on this rare species.
Okay. So now you learned Malayalam.
I I know a little bit, and I'm actually learning to write and speak a
Yeah.
little bit. I mean, it's going very slow because it's a very hard language,
So
especially
it
with
will be a
someone.
little, yeah, it's easy for you, no, to gather the information about the
Yes,
species from the local people.
yes,
And
yes.
really, the research means searching for new, right? So you really let me that fact.
I can.
Uh, you
Yeah,
can't hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, research means searching for new, right? New knowledge. So
Yeah,
you really make that into act. You
thank
really
you so
travel
much.
from a long distance to Kerala without knowing language. You are gathering information about the species. Really, really wonderful, Garushi.
Thank you so
And
much,
all
ma'am.
the best for all your future endeavor. And I would like to thank you on behalf of our department, faculties, and students. My heartfelt thanks to you to deliver an inspiring talk and also the tips for our students for procuring the research grant. That really meaningful, and we are very thankful to you, Arushi.
Thank you
And
so much.
as Suja ma'am said and our director said, we are ready for all the future collaboration with you. Any collaboration that you need, our students are ready, our department is ready.
Thank you
So
so much, ma'am. That means a lot.
we are expecting a collaboration with you, Arishi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your kind words, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aishi, once again on behalf of SES family for the wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.